see if we can get this going. I know I went a little early, but we're going to start up anyways. Thank you so much for tuning in from the Digital Weather Center. It's been a hot minute since I've done one of these live updates. And today, dare I say, there we go. Now we're up on YouTube. Perfect. I feel a lot better now. I thought we were going to be streaming a blank screen for a little bit, but we are all squared away. It is 11 o'clock sharp here on this Tuesday morning in Central Florida. Digital meteorologist David Nazario back at the helm in the Digital Weather Center. And yes, I thought it was fitting that we get back to these streams just in time to start talking tropics. We're so back, and we're going to do it all over again. And the main reason we're hopping on here today is not because there is trouble on the horizon, but because social media is already coming ablaze with some of the little isms and shenanigans that our long-range computer models are spitting out. And I'm sure you've probably seen it if you've been tracking the tropics up to this point, and will definitely continue to do so as we get closer and closer to the official start per the calendar of the hurricane season. Now, let's get you over to the GFS. The GFS has been a hot topic for the last couple of days now. Probably longer than that. I mean, shoot, I'll tell you the truth. I even have it pulled up to my left here because I want to see what it spits out at us as we get our latest update from it. It's been trending the last few days that there could be something trying to slowly come together to our south. And when I say to our south, I mean either in the Caribbean or in the East Pacific. The East Pacific hurricane season is only a few days away from getting started, so this would be right on schedule. But I want to start off by immediately saying that it would not be outlandish for the Atlantic basin to get started a little early. We have seen that on a repetitive basis, and it is not entirely out of the realm of possibility, but I do apologize in advance if you've actually found on social media, whether it be X, the old Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, even YouTube, even on television, they could possibly be already posting up different images of some of the wildness that has come out of the computer model. And with that being said, let's take you through what the model is showing. So this is going to be our GFS, the American model, wind gusts across a very familiar area. You can see the Eastern Pacific off to the left-hand side, Pacific monsoonal trough already kind of cranking. That's going to be this area of winds right in through there. Already have a couple of little eddies on the monsoonal trough as well. Some spin as the winds come together in that general area. And then obviously we have the Gulf, Bay of Campeche, and the Western and Southern Caribbean. Now, why am I drawing all these doodles? Well, the main reason is, and as we get further into the discussion, I'll explain why, this is an area that I do think we're going to have to watch, not only now, but through the season. Last hurricane season taught us the lesson that it wasn't what came off of Africa, more or less. It was what developed close to home. And from a preparedness standpoint, that only gives us a couple of days to get our act together. You should be finalizing your plan. When it comes time to prepare for these tropical events, that's when you go out and get your last-minute necessities. You should already have a plan put together, ready to rock at a moment's notice, especially during June and July of the hurricane season, October and November, sometimes the back end of September, arguably so, especially given the ocean temperatures we have out there. But we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment. Let's get you through the model data. So as I take us rapidly through time, in traditional fashion, watch what happens in the Caribbean. There you go. A very familiar sight to a lot of us. And yes, I'm looking right at this giant ball of very strong winds headed right towards the island of Jamaica. Now, I'm going to say right out of the gate, this would be an unprecedented and somewhat unrealistic event. I say somewhat because last year Hurricane Beryl taught us a lot of lessons. It broke several records across the Atlantic, through the Caribbean. So again, there's always that 1% chance Mother Nature defies the laws that have been put in place by us meteorologists and through historical data. Is this the most likely outcome? Probably not. No. So you definitely don't want to feed into some of the other social media artists out there who are plastering this all over their pages. And it's true. They're putting it front and center. They're making sure to draw as much attention to it. But I'm here to tell you, this is not the most likely outcome. Are we watching the Caribbean? As a matter of fact, yeah. You take a look at our tropical probabilities, this is the highest they've been in an extended period of time. This is something, if you followed us last hurricane season, we leaned in on, both myself and meteorologist Jonathan Kagis. We brought up these probabilities a lot just to show you all where it is particularly that we're watching on a day-to-day basis. These products here, the color coding and the ensembles and the long-range graphics that come together as a group are far more realistic to use when trying to look at the long-distance future a week, 2 weeks out. Looking at our deterministic models like the one I just showed you, they do a ton of math, they do a ton of physics driven equations, and after a certain point, they go into what's called chaos theory. On top of that, computer models also have a couple of biases. The GFS, for instance, has a wonderful bias to where if you get a lot of thunderstorms firing in a small area over an extended period of that computer model time frame, it'll decide, okay, hurricane. And that's exactly what has been happening there. Of course, there is some science and there is some realism rooted into that. If you didn't have the necessary ingredients capable of producing something like that coming together, the model wouldn't do it. Obviously, the model never does anything for fun. There's always a level of reality or science rooted into the solution that we see. But when you go that far out, 250, 300 hours plus into the future, naturally, there are a lot of things in the current state and in the short-term state of the atmosphere that could change, that'll totally change that long-term solution. I hope that makes sense. It's a chain reaction effect. If the model catches something new now, that changes the end result. If the model changes something within the first 72 hours of a computer loop, that'll change everything in the long term. It's kind of like doing your old-fashioned algebra. If you have 6x minus 2 equals this, if you change x, your y is going to be vastly different every time. I hope that makes sense. But this is an area that we are going to continue to watch over the next several weeks and for the duration of the hurricane season, and this is precisely why. Our water temperatures are very strange this upcoming summer and upcoming hurricane season. Last year, everything was record. Everything was record setting. Everything was record this, record that. We were above average, if not incredibly above average, in terms of our sea surface temperature anomalies. And remember, an anomaly basically means how far above or below the norm are we? These aren't the actual temperatures. That's another thing I don't want anyone to misconstrue because this has been posted up across all things social media. They've been highlighting the blue shades of color off the African coast, and as a result, some sources are saying there may not even be a hurricane season. It's going to be a dud. I also want to emphasize you don't want to be lulled into a false sense of security. And the reason being is if you look at where our warmest waters are currently, they're right in that same general area with where the model is already spinning up phantom storms. Might not even be a phantom. Last hurricane season, both Raphael and Sarah both came to fruition and the model spotted it 300 hours out. So at the end of the day, again, there is some reality rooted in this. It's a matter of how you come about it or how you go about it. And I do think the fact that our water temperatures are warmest close to home, this could very well possibly focus where it is our greatest instability for tropical thunderstorms remains, where the greatest lift and favorable conditions for these tropical disturbances or tropical waves to try to get themselves a little better organized and take off into something more than just a rainmaker. We're going to be watching this very closely, especially the Gulf right here, just off our west coast. That could be detrimental to where these storms form up. Milton, Francine, and Helene all rapidly got going at a moment's notice once they made their way out of the Bay of Campeche, out of the Western Caribbean, and up towards the north, just off the coastline of very heavily populated areas. The next big factor here that's been very, very volatile is going to be our ENSO regions, the El Nino Southern Oscillation quadrants that are out there over the tropical Pacific. As you can see here, even though per Climate Prediction Center La Nina has ended, we still have cooler than average waters out there, and something called a costero El Nino, something right off the South American coast, coined by a famous or reputable meteorologist down in that corner of the world, has also washed out. So the warming trend we've witnessed out there has come to a slowdown, and we are still in a neutral phase. It is likely to remain that way, which means we'll have to watch even more critical variables as we go through the hurricane season. It's not a slam dunk forecast this time around like many of us thought last year. Now, This is something that we'll also be watching very closely. Believe it or not, the Bermuda-Azores high across the Atlantic, that big old dome of high pressure that is always there 365 days out of the year. It dictates our weather during the winter, during the spring, during the summer, outside of the hurricane season, and back and so forth in a full cycle. It never goes away. This is called a semi-permanent pressure system. It has been bottled up to the west of where it is typically situated, directly over the subtropical Atlantic, kind of where my centermost arrow is. That is usually where that bubble of high pressure is located, but we have seen a bit of a favoring closer to the United States. And as a result, that's why it's been so dry out here in central Florida. Finally, we've had some stuff come across the United States to knock it down a couple of notches and push it back into the Atlantic, bringing in some more moisture, bringing in our rain chances, or bringing up our rain chances, which is excellent news. The caveat to that is that going to be the configuration as we go through June, July, and then especially the peak of the hurricane season? It was last year. That's what steered Beryl from the Atlantic all the way into Texas. That's what took Milton, drove it off towards the east, and then back up into central Florida, believe it or not, as it interacted with a trough trying to come off the United States. It's also what pushed Debbie into our neck of the woods and several other tropical waves that never quite had the opportunity to develop. It also is what bullied Raphael and Sarah away from central Florida, which could have been 2 additional storms that we received. So we're going to be watching this very closely, and if anything does start to form where my red shading here down in the lower left-hand corner is, it will only have one direction to go. It won't likely be able to punch up north. It'll have to move towards the west, either bullied into Central America, hitting some of our islands down there in the Caribbean, our neighbors to the south, or dare I say, escaping into the Gulf. And then finally, tropical climatology. This goes without saying, especially for us here in Central Florida. The hurricane season is synonymous with August, September, and October. But we want to make sure we're ready to rock and roll at a moment's notice, even before June 1st. If you look at the table here, it is not impossible to get a named storm before June. If you look down there in the lower left corner, I'll go ahead and take it full screen. Notice June 1st is the first tick to the right of where this chart starts. And there are still named storms that have formed during the month of May. It is not completely out of the realm of possibility. Even during our last strong El Nino year, 2023, we had Tropical Storm Arlene building off our west coast at the last couple days of May and then took on named storm status right on June 1st. So again, I want to emphasize you need to have a plan. You need to be prepared now, truthfully. And I don't say that, to sound alarmist or anything like that. I'm just saying, the greatest athletes, the greatest bodybuilders, the greatest anybody in the world, they don't spend a couple days preparing for a big event. They spend weeks upon weeks upon weeks training up, preparing themselves for a big test, a big competition, a big challenge, a championship, you name it. They spend their time training and preparing year-round. Obviously, that's going to look very different for a lot of us out there watching. You have to determine what looks the best for you and how to develop that course of action. We can only give you the best advice and try to bring you as accurate of lead time as possible leading up to a major event. Because unfortunately, I do think Florida is going to have to keep their head on a swivel this hurricane season once again based on the trends we have up until this point. This is what could possibly start to manifest itself as we get through the second half of May. It's called the Central American Gyre, and it can spin off tropical systems at a moment's notice. That's what developed Helene and Milton last hurricane season, and some could argue Francine as well, that ended up hitting closer to the Baton Rouge, New Orleans area. And so with that, before we get ready to close out, I'm going to go ahead and show you my screen just to show you what it is that we're watching closely here. So this is going to be what's called a Havaller diagram. It's a time and location-based chart with an X and Y axes that shows not only longitude, but time phasing. As you descend the X-axis, you're going forward in time. As you go along the Y-axis at the bottom, you're changing your longitude. So for example, left-hand side of the screen, you're looking at Africa, the Indian Ocean. The right-hand side of the chart, you're looking at our area, the Gulf, the Caribbean, the Atlantic. And if you look around mid to late May, you can see those shades of red and orange change to the blue and the teal colors. That means we're going to go away from an area of upper level suppression to rising motions. It means we're going to have what's called diverging air high up in the atmosphere, which then promotes lift down where we are at ground level for storms to kind of thrive off of. This is the European model. You can also see the same thing once I switch the screen over to the GFS. The GFS actually shows a more powerful standing wave in effect over the Caribbean, over the Western Atlantic. And when I say standing wave, that simply means it's not moving. It was a once moving wave. Now it's just kind of standing still in the pattern. And I think this is why our models are starting to pick up on the potential of a broad area of low pressure forming down either right off the East Pacific coastline of Central America or back in our neighborhood in the Caribbean. So we're going to be watching this very closely. Here's a look at it from a top-down perspective, and you can see all those blue shades focusing in on the East Pac and the Caribbean. So as we wrap up, I just want to emphasize we're not saying a named storm is coming. We're not saying it's time to panic. No, the key takeaway from this stream, and we will be doing more of these as we get closer and closer to the hurricane season, and then especially through the heart of the hurricane season, the key takeaway here is preparedness. We're running out of time. You don't want to be one of the last-minute folks having to scramble in the mass exodus that is Central Florida or wherever you're tuning in from because you didn't think twice about the hurricane season, especially given the ocean temperatures out there and where some of our lift and the dynamics to develop tropical cyclones might exist this hurricane season. Something coming off of Africa, you got almost 2 weeks to watch it and prepare. Something forming in the Bay of Campeche or just to the south of us, kind of similar to where Wilma, Ian, Charlie, etc. all took off over last several iconic hurricane seasons. You're only going to have 2 to 3 days max. 2 to 3 days. So the key takeaway here, folks, is we're going to be watching. Let us watch. You guys make sure that you button up your plans. Don't have to prepare. There's a difference between planning and preparing. Planning leads into the preparation phase. You should know how it is your preparations are going to go and how to iron that all out when it comes time to hit that action button. So thank you all so much for tuning in today. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them in the comments section down below upon the conclusion of this live stream. And we'll be keeping you updated every step of the way. And you know for certain that here at News 6, we're going to be watching the tropics and everything else that could come towards Central Florida all day, every day. So thank you all for watching. We'll talk to you again soon. Until then, this is the Digital Weather Center signing out.